welcome to the Empathy Edge to talk to us about all things Empathy Week and teaching children empathy. Welcome.
Amazing to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with your story because you are a filmmaker. You used to be a teacher. You are really all about human-led storytelling. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what brought you to this work of helping children learn the skill of empathy.
Oh, where do you want me to start? Early on, I'll probably start from maybe me as a kid at school, because I think that's always interesting. I think that tells a lot about people. But I was an active young boy, let's say. I was involved in a lot of sport as a kid. I actually really enjoyed school. I had quite an interesting schooling life in the sense that I went to a state school, public school in the US, up until the age of 16. And then I actually went to a private sixth form or a private college, 16 to 18, and had a huge kind of shift in what I saw as education. But that's been super useful now as an adult, having seen the two kind of competing systems of education. Loved both for very different reasons. Was very kind of, I've always been quite practical led. So I really enjoyed science because I just loved the practical side of it. And I was kind of pushed to be academic by my parents. I think I've got like an Irish dad and my father kind of born in Ireland, then grew up in the UK, and then my mum Scottish, and they kind of both wanted their sons, I've got a brother, to be kind of academic and push for that kind of university level just to set me up for life. So I did science and I studied biochemistry at uni, and I thought I might become a doctor. And then I actually decided to go into teaching. And I think that came from the fact that my mother was a childminder growing up. So my mum looked after 2 to 3 children from the ages of 6 months to 3 years old in my house from the age of 2. It was all I remember from the age of 2 till I was 22. Even when I came back from university, I'd be woken up at 7 a.m. by, screaming babies and children being dropped off at the house. And picking up a child or picking up a baby was just second nature because it's all I ever knew.
Yeah.
And I think I had then that kind of led me to, right, teaching is quite practical. I like kids. I like getting on with kids. I was coaching some basketball as well. So I tried my hand at teaching, science teaching, which is actually crazy because it's just a completely different side of the classroom when you're the teacher and you're in charge of 15 Bunsen burners and 30 kids,
Yeah.
trying not to kill themselves with fire going everywhere and just metal exploding and all sorts of stuff. But I loved it. I absolutely loved teaching. And I was teaching North London, a school of 1,600 kids. I went through a program called Teach First, which is the equivalent to Teach for America. And actually there's 50 kind of different organizations that do the same thing. So there's Teach for Nepal, there's Teach for Vietnam, there's Teach for I think Nigeria now as well. Yeah, they're all over the world, but basically they send you into schools that maybe have students that are of lower socioeconomic background and are really trying to bring up education and level it up for people. And I taught for 3 years, and that was a hugely defining, I suppose, life moment for me. First kind of idea of proper work. I mean, I'd done lots of other jobs, working in bars and working as a checkout person and all sorts of stuff, but actually having a full-time job and then being responsible for students' education at the age of 22 is quite overwhelming. But that's kind of where I suppose, my education.
So how did you make that leap into filmmaking from teaching?
So I really loved, when I was teaching, I loved the fact that I had a chance to also, I was quite creative in my lessons. I maybe pushed it a little bit. I was a bit cheeky because I think the head teacher would want you to run a lesson in a certain way, but I would try and be creative. And I would also sometimes just stop a lesson for half an hour and just talk to students about, what is going on in the world, because they would complain about the most ridiculous of things, like a 15-minute homework. I once remember a girl, I won't say her name, but year 11, so 15, 16 years old. And I gave them half of the time of the homework that they should have had, because I was always about, right, I just want you to do something that is going to be really beneficial for you. And this 15 minutes of exam questions, I want you to do this. And he's like, "Oh, sir, I've got a party this weekend." And I said, "Oh, sorry for giving you homework that's going to help you for the rest of your life. Sorry for giving you something that's actually going to benefit you. I said
Yeah.
to you, I will only give you something that." And I said to them, I said, "Were you shot on the way to school?" And this was probably 2015, 16,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot around ISIS, a lot around Syria in
Mm-hmm.
the news. And I had, our school had refugees from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria as well. A lot of the students in my class were the children of refugees or people that have come over to this country for a better life. And I said to them, go home and ask your parents, how many of you in here are first generation English born? Most of them. And actually the ones that weren't then were, they arrived in the country. I said, you're so lucky to be here. And I don't know if you've ever seen The White Helmets. It's a Netflix film which basically followed the Syrian civil kind of force. They rescue people out of bombed out buildings, and it won an Oscar. And the opening sequence of this film is a bombed out building. They rush into it, and they manage to pull out a baby, and they're all screaming, "Allah Akbar, God is great!" Coming out of the building. A child's crying, but they're they're celebrating that they're pulling people out alive, and all of a sudden you just hear, and another bomb hits exactly that building, and it just goes black and it just cuts out. And I showed them this clip, and just it was dead silent in the room of like 30, 16-year-old teenagers who had just been putting up a little fight about some small bits of homework. Monday morning, 100% homework in. I don't think I'd ever had that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was little things like this, little moments where I also had an infamous group of young men called the U Gang, self-proclaimed U Gang. So they all got ungraded in their mock exams. A bunch of young boys put together, and I taught them, and it was the same thing with them. I would always show them like motivational videos, often around basketball because it was a shared common interest about going against the odds and trying to pump them up. And I realized the power that video and film had. I also really enjoyed speaking. And then when it came 3 years in, I just decided to, I basically kind of burnt out from education. I burnt out from teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly took too much on. I got promoted too fast. The position was there as a young male with an ego. I wanted more money and a little bit more power, but also kind of common sense. I was like, if I don't take it, I'm going to end up doing this job anyway for less money. So took a kind of position as a head of chemistry at 23, 24. And then I also studied for part-time masters in leadership and education at UCL, and was writing then a dissertation of 20,000 words in the summer. And I just decided, right, this is too much. And I took some time out because I realized I'd been in formal education, whether that was school, university, or then teaching myself, from the age of 5. And I was now 25. And I was like, I've never actually had any choice about when I take a holiday or when I, what I do with my. So I took some time out. And then it was from there that I managed to do a voluntary trip with the government to work with entrepreneurs. And it basically then, I really realized that ultimately I came back. I wanted to do stuff around homelessness. That was something I chose as a teacher in school to talk about, to get the students to really care about. And I essentially picked up a camera and started filming people across the UK, and then even in Mexico at the Homeless World Cup. And that's where my kind of idea of filmmaking came. Was I wasn't trained in it. I wasn't any good at it. I learned through YouTube.
Right.
And I just realized that actually to tell the stories of people who are homeless, I actually needed to film. I needed to use film as a tool, and I realized it could be a very powerful tool to actually develop that empathy in people.
So let's talk about that, because how do you feel as a filmmaker? I've talked a lot in my book, and also as I am sort of a part-time actress in my spare time, which I don't have any of now that I have an 8-year-old. But I really believe that film and story and documentary and art is a great teacher of empathy. It gives us a safe place to practice empathy and practice thinking about cognitive empathy. What would it be like if I was in that situation? For you on the other side of the camera, how do you see film being a tool to engender and cultivate empathy? What have you seen? You've obviously shared what you've seen in your classroom, but since now doing filmmaking full time and telling those other stories, what are some of the transformations that you see, and how do you feel that film can be used to create more empathy?
I think we all can relate to a time. If you're listening to this podcast, you've probably been to a cinema. And I don't think it's not just so much about the film or the art, whatever art form it is. I also think it's about the environment that it's observed in. So I could show you a film on my phone on a busy train on a 9 a.m. commute, and you've got some headphones in and you're trying to listen and watch it, and it would not have the same impact as it would if you sat in a dark cinema with really good sound and really good visuals. So I think environment is also an important thing to consider, but I think it is just so powerful. And the thing about art, and the thing about any art form, whether it's a play, song, film, is that actually everyone reacts to it completely differently. So if I sat everyone in a cinema screening, showed them Star Wars, same cinema, same day, same city, same location, the weather's the same, everything's the same, handed surveys to people outside as they came out, and I said, what's your favorite moment? Where was the moment where you felt most emotional? All of these questions, they would all have completely different answers. And that's because all of us have completely different lives. Up until this moment in time, we have all lived completely different past experiences. And I think the power of film is that it allows us to then, it gives us an excuse also to talk about our past experiences. It gives us a reason to reflect on what we've done, on where we've been. It gives us hope for the future as well. It brings out so many emotions and so many thoughts and ideas. And one powerful thing that I've realized with the films that I make for Empathy Week, whether they go into schools, is that they are conversation starters. So I always say you have either one of two people when you show a film. You either have someone that can relate and therefore feels seen and heard and understood, but also has then permission to talk about that, and can also bounce off, can reflect their own experiences off someone else, so that they don't feel as alien. They don't feel as often people think, oh, it's only me that's going through this. I can't say anything because I don't want to look like I'm making a scene, or all of these things. All of a sudden that person has a little bit more confidence to say, do you know what, I felt like this in the past. Not the same thing, but I can relate. And then you've got the other type of person who goes, do you know what, I had no idea. I had not even thought about that perspective. I'd not even seen that kind of life, but now I have a bit more understanding. Both are just as equally as powerful. But what happens when you have both of them in the same room, and then you create that environment where you allow discussion? Oh, it's amazing. I have teachers like come to me and say, oh, the lesson plans are they're too long. I said, okay, well, what's long about? Oh, the students wouldn't stop asking questions. And I said, isn't that the perfect scenario? You know, where you have a lesson where, or a time where students are asking all these questions, and I go back to teachers and say, actually, this is showing that you need to spend more time talking about this with your students. And we all know that if you rock up to a room full of people, it could be students, it could be adults, go, right, mental health awareness week or month, right, who's feeling crap, you know? And no one's going to say anything.
Right.
But if you show a film and then you give permission for people to, and an opportunity for people to talk about it, film, songs, art, theatre, cultural events, they are the key to unlocking emotions, perspectives of other people. And without them, our world really suffers. And I think we saw that through COVID, where art was diminished and these cultural gatherings were diminished.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what led you to creating Empathy Week, which is, a worldwide event where schools from all over the world are participating, students from all over the world and their teachers? How did that come about? If you can just quickly give us a
so
origin
it came
story
about,
of Empathy Week.
Yeah, it came about by chance in a way. So I was filming a lot around homelessness in the UK, and then there was a man called John Finnegan who runs a football team full of people who are experiencing homelessness. Again, giving them a chance to play and feel seen and heard. Said, "Oh, have you heard about the Homeless World Cup?" I said, "No, what's that?" He said, everyone gets together and plays football from different countries, and it was in Mexico that year. And I said, "Do you know what? I'm going to go." Went out there. met the Indian team, who then said, do you want to come to India after? And I was, by this point, I was just like, just riding riding the wave of opportunity. And I said, if you can pay for my flight and keep me alive whilst I'm out there, then yeah, I'll come. So I went out and volunteered out there, and I helped them develop a leadership course alongside their football program. And I was there for 3 months, and then I realized, hang on, I'm going to be in the middle of India, where I'm going to be alongside these people. I'm going to really get to know them, and my filmmaking's now got to a good level where I was starting to get paid. It was starting to become my income. I said, I'm going to create some films, and by this point I was doing lots of different projects. I said I could create some films about these people that it isn't poverty porn. It's not a charity advert. It's not for charity. It's not to raise money. And I think that's really important. I think, yeah, I think we could have raised money, but I think it was really important not to do that, to really emphasize that this film is about developing empathy, not about raising money. And I think there's been so much damage being done by charity in the past, where it's played off of people's environment and to raise money for a good cause, okay, but it doesn't change behavior. And I had lots of frustrations when I was a teacher, and everything kind of came into one. I was so annoyed with students just bringing in £1 or $1 or whatever to wear non-uniform for this cause. They couldn't even tell me the name of the charity they're raising money for. So it's not changing their behavior, which is actually what we need in this world, because money goes, it's fleeting, right? But to change the behavior of a student so that they understand another perspective, and maybe someone who has a disability and they don't, and be able to communicate with it, that's way more powerful. So I thought, right, we can create these films, and I have the trust of these people as this organization called Slum Soccer. And it just started as a project, and it just started actually for secondary students, ages 11 to 18, and just for UK schools. And then other countries and teachers got wind of it, started signing up. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to stop them. So they did that, and then second year we expanded to primary school. So we now do 5 to 18 years old. So we how it works is that I film an amazing person's life. For 11 to 18-year-olds, I create a film that's 10 minutes long. It's then slightly shorter, and there's slightly different topics for 8 to 10-year-olds. And then there's a 5 to 7-year-old version that's 3 or 4 minutes long, which is very much just about the students getting to see them, meet them, see their environment. So it's managed for their cognitive level of education, and for them to be able to engage with it. And then we have lesson resources that go alongside it to support that learning, because it's not just about watching a film and then, okay, done. It's about those discussions.
So does the week take place where they log in online and everyone's doing the same, watching the same film and having the same discussion every day? Or do you give them just one film and one group of curricula, and then they can do it whenever they want during that week? How does it actually work?
So it's changed over the years, and we've adapted it just from feedback, and we're constantly learning. It's kind of changed a little bit every year. But what we now say is that, right, Empathy Week, you start it in Empathy Week. This year, for the first time, we've actually got like a series of events, webinars, and different things for students and teachers during that week. So it's more of a celebration of empathy and different concepts. But they start with we now call it like a 5-week film program, because teachers have said that they actually prefer to watch one film a week because it's so dense and so much. And actually that works better, right? The more touch points you have over a longer period of time, is going to develop empathy better than a really high spike, a full empathy day and then nothing for another year. So we actually prefer that. That's the feedback we've had from teachers. But ultimately, once teachers have registered, having been a teacher myself, we try and make it as easy as possible, right, for all the resources. So you get even certificates to download. We even pre-write a letter to parents that you can just, as a teacher, you can change your school address and then send that out to parents so they know what's going on and they can get involved. We try and keep it as simple as possible, in the sense that we have one key teacher at each school that logs in with one login, because I've been on the receiving end of trying to do something at school, and then you've got 150 teachers at school, 30 of them can't sign in. It's just chaos, right? So we try and keep it as simple as possible, but also there's a structure, but there's a flexibility to it as well.
Right. And so can parents participate in it, or does it have to be through their school?
So we always ask schools to register. That's kind of our base, because also, we've got our own IP to protect, but also because we want these films to be delivered in the way that encourages the development of empathy,
In a group
not
setting.
sympathy, and a group setting,
Right.
and with a trusted adult there as well, because
Mhm.
like we're saying, a lot of the time you do not know, even your students, potentially what they've been through. And
Mhm.
so some of these films in the past that we have filmed, some of them have talked about suicide for the older students, some of them talked about really serious issues, racism and gender gender
Gender
sorry, my
identity.
brain's gender identity, various different
Mhm.
discrimination as well. And you might not know that actually a student is
Right.
going through that. And so if
Right.
that's brought up and they're on their own,
Right.
it might, or they might not want to talk to parent. However, this year for registered schools, we are giving access to the events platform with the talks and things for parents to
Mhm.
get involved with too. And it's
Nice.
definitely something that we want to continue to do. I always talk about it like the triangle, right, of education is really, you've got the school as an
Mhm.
environment, you've got the teacher, and you've got the parent, and you've got the kind of the student in the middle. And
Mhm.
often one of them's missing.
Yes.
Either the teachers are disengaged, or the school's not a good environment, or the parents kind of out the picture.
Yeah.
And I think if you can have those three around a student, that's what
Mhm.
really brings holistic well-being and really great education. And then
Yeah.
the grades and everything else follows. But
Right.
I'm so frustrated with that focus on academics at the moment without
Well,
the well-being.
I want to talk about the focus on well-being and the catalyst for this event and for the work that you're doing. What have you seen in terms of the benefits that the schools get and the students get from an event like Empathy Week?
Yeah, it's been amazing to actually go into different schools and see what they've done with it as well. And I really like the fact that we kind of trust teachers to take the resources and then, okay, we say this is how we would use them, but every school is different. Of course it is. And not even just every school, every classroom's different. So even within watching the same film within each of the classes in the same school, you're going to get different conversations and different outcomes and different talks. But the important thing is that there is conversation and that it is accepted. And then that is well-being, when you can talk openly about yourself, when people feel understood. If you can increase understanding, which is
Mhm.
ultimately the foundation and core of empathy, you
Mhm.
increase connection. If you increase connection, you increase trust. If you increase trust, you make better relationships. What's the foundation of well-being? Good relationships. It's the foundation with
Mhm.
your family, with your friends, with society.
Mhm.
And if you then have better well-being, you are happier. If you're happier and you have great well-being, you have greater productivity. And we've seen schools now actually involve the whole year with empathy lessons, put empathy lessons themselves.
Mhm.
They're now trained more about what empathy actually is,
Mhm.
rather than them just thinking it's, the one, okay, just trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Because we try and, it's a useful saying, but we try and say, I've seen Brené Brown talk about it as well.
Right.
I'm sure it's not so much about you putting someone else in in their shoes. It's about walking, holding someone's hand, and then bringing you through. And I think we've just seen, well, we've done some pilot research with Cambridge University and Dr. Helen Demetrio, who released a paper on empathy in students in 2021 as well. And we've seen that actually our program, even if it's just done for 1 year, the first year that it's done, there's an increase in self-esteem in students. There's a reduction in othering. There's a increased want to find out more about people from other countries from before and after. And there's an increased level of empathy as well in students. And you think, God, we always talk about, okay, it's not about 1 year. We talk about building empathy generation, and that is from the age of 5 to 18. Hopefully, we'll even move into early years from 3 soon. But if you can build that 5 people's films every year for 13 years of education from 5 to 8, that person will have left with 65, an understanding of 65 different people's life stories. Now, it doesn't 65, in an age where numbers are thrown about and big numbers are used all the time, 65 doesn't sound a lot. But if you watch the trailer for Empathy Week just for this year, and you see the diversity of the 5 people from Nepal, Kirwan, who's blind, completely visually impaired from birth, but yet talks about his disability as a complete kind of gift and advantage, and he gets to experience life like not many other people do. You got Tendi, who's a Sherpa who's summited Everest 14 times. Then you've got Bhavana, who talks about gender equality and what it is to be a powerful female in Nepal. Santwana, who is then a teacher entering the education system in Nepal and wants to do her best for the kids. And then Mingma, who talks about growing up in Kathmandu and becoming a teacher himself, but then also his perspective on life in Nepal from like kind of a cool young guy who's just pretty relaxed, completely different stories. And that's just 5, and you times that by 30. These students, when they go out into the working world, when they go out into university, they don't batter an eyelid at someone who's gay. They don't batter an eyelid who's someone completely different race to them, or religion, or creed, or belief. They understand that you can speak with someone, communicate well with someone, and still disagree with them. You can eat at the same table as people that you don't necessarily agree with the way they live their life. You might even think they're morally wrong, let's say, but you can still talk with them, communicate with them, respect them, understand them, work alongside them. If you can do that, I believe there would be no war. I mean, that's a really hopeful, optimistic picture, but you know.
Well, I mean, it's true. I mean, I think that the sooner we develop the innate empathy that we already have, instead of letting the muscle atrophy at a younger
Yeah.
age, the better off our future leaders. And, you know, I hate to call kids future leaders, because they actually can be leaders right now. So, you know, in terms of the next generation of organizational leaders, whether it's government or for profits or social impact organizations or just, you know, community groups, the sooner we can help them just flex that muscle, so they don't even have to think about it, the better.
Exactly.
Right.
But you're right. I completely agree about the future leaders, and I agree students are leaders now as well. But there is also a realization that we need the leaders that are now to develop this. And we've started to
Yes.
do stuff with companies, and I know that you are all
Yes.
over companies, and it will frustrate you as much as it will frustrate me, that how you have to define empathy to these companies, and how you have to
Absolutely.
explain it's not something soft, it's not something weak, but it's actually increases productivity. All of the research is there to say that it will increase retention, it will increase your profit margins, it will increase your bottom line, and not just increase your bottom line, it'll make everyone feel happier. They'll want to be at work, there'll be less sick days off. You will have an environment where people thrive, which is ultimately what we try to create at home for ourselves,
Right.
and what we want to create at work. But we need the leaders of today to actually get on it, because it's no good just, I think that's a frustration with students. In the UK, if anyone follows UK politics, watching this, they'll understand that we've had, I think, I can't even now think, is it 3 or 4 prime ministers this year? I don't even know.
It has been a
But
little bit of a game of musical chairs there. Yeah.
it's ridiculous. And you've got the kids in school saying, oh, well, Boris Johnson, our old prime minister, he lied. Why isn't he in jail? Yet we're telling them to be more empathetic and be moral, and talk about honesty, and the leader, the number one person in the country, apart from, I guess, the royals or whatever, is lying and then is keeping their job. It's just absurd. It's just ridiculous. And so we need actually our leaders today to really follow a life of integrity, a life of honesty, and put empathy there. And they don't have a clue. There's such a divide. You know, they don't even have an understanding of what food costs. I was watching the news just tonight, and you know, a firefight, they were saying firefighters that are on £32,000 a year are using food banks, and this MP has said that's ridiculous, they need to budget better. Straight away, that
Wow.
MP is on a salary of £82,000 or £84,000 plus all of
Right.
their expenses for the year. That,
Right.
you know, there's just obviously an obvious comparison there, where there just is a complete lack of empathy, a complete lack of understanding, and a want to understand. Has
Right.
that MP, has that parliamentary person even spoken to
Right.
someone? And I think our society is craving for just honesty, empathy, integrity, and it would be so powerful as well.
Well, and I think it's also about the fact that we've become, and it's very true in the United States, but I feel like I'm starting to see it in other developing countries as well. This move away from collectivism to individualism. And this idea that, I mean, when you talk about government, for example, I am not going to support any legislation that I myself will never have to use, versus understanding that there are people out there and you may never have to take advantage of that policy or that law or that that investment, but other people do. So it's worth fighting for, especially if they're your constituents, right? There's this very, like, if that doesn't impact me or mine, then it's not important. It's not
Yeah.
priority. And we've got to start moving to this place where our leaders are thinking about things and trying to implement policies across, government organizations that may not benefit them, but
Yeah.
benefit other people because of
Yeah.
the experiences of other people.
Yeah. Selfless leadership. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I also think this is where coming back to film, this is where film's so powerful,
Mm-hmm.
because I can get a group of people together, and I
Mm-hmm.
do this in companies as well, and show them 2 or 3 films within a short space of time. And on also film and arts, we can communicate very powerful, strong messages in a very short amount of time if you're good at storytelling. And within, an hour, I could show 4 or 5 different people's films and life stories to someone, and they can get those perspectives in a powerful way. Whereas if you were to do it in person, maybe someone's got to travel. And I think there's a scalability.
Yes.
So with Empathy Week, the design of it is to have a scalability. The
Mm-hmm.
perfect scenario would be I would pick up loads of kids, put them on a plane, they would experience like playing for the first time,
Yeah.
then they would get dropped in the middle of Kathmandu this year.
See, if only the
And
billionaires would spend money on that instead of buying social media networks, that would be
yeah,
great, right?
just charter like this empathy exchange for everyone, right?
Exactly.
What do you remember about school or education or university? It's not the day-to-day in the classroom learning.
Mm-mm.
It's that one day that someone came in and spoke to you
Yeah.
and
Or the field
inspired you,
trips or
or
the
or the
guest
trips.
speakers. Yeah.
And what's the first thing to go in a time like now where we're facing
Mm-mm.
recession? Trips, arts, culture, anything that is not necessary, as
Quote
I'm,
unquote. Yes.
for
Mm-hmm.
people listening, I'm
Yeah.
doing the kind of
He's
Joey
doing air
from
quotes right
Friends.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. um it's crazy because we just need to spend more time listening, and
Mm-hmm.
listening, but not just listening, asking questions, because people always go listening, and listening's great, but unless you're asking questions, you're not having a conversation and you're not
Right.
learning. You're
Right.
just onboarding information.
Right.
The real understanding comes from when you do ask a question,
Mm-hmm.
because listening, you might not fully understand still. You can
Mm-hmm.
hear it, but you need to actually go, okay, so you said you did this, but why did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say with companies as well, agreeing with each other and disagreeing with each other generally stop conversations.
Right.
And people kind of get the disagree one and they go, agree one, I don't really get what you mean. I say, okay, well, say you've got a meeting, you need to make a decision. Someone comes in and says, right, this is what we're going to do. And you go, yeah, no, great. That sounds awesome. Let's do it. 6 months down the line, you get to a point where like, why has that happened? Oh no, you've agreed this. And you realize that actually you can agree on something, but with completely different rationale and reasoning behind why you're agreeing without
Mm-hmm.
explaining. And
Mm-hmm.
we need to ask more questions, even if you're agreeing with someone, especially in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Why? What's your reason for it? What are you trying to get out of that?
Right.
Because we just assume that people understand or hear our thoughts and understand what we're saying, and it's not
Right.
it's not the case. And I think if we can lead with a bit more curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
that'd be amazing. And I always say, people always go, right, how do you develop empathy? It's the big thing. How do you, like,
Right.
what's the easiest way? And it's always just about increasing the number of experiences
Mm-hmm.
and increasing the diversity of those experiences. And I say to people, if you do those 2 things, you won't be going far wrong, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
just as simply as possible, increase the number and diversity of experience. The problem is, what does that require? Time, sometimes
Right.
money as
Time and
well.
access. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's
Right.
about how can we, and I think that's where films, again, arts, things can
Yes.
come in and be so powerful as low cost, scalable actions to really
For
change the
sure.
perspectives and build
For
empathy in
sure.
people.
And to leverage them even within organizational teams and leverage film as a catalyst for discussion. I am part of the faculty of an organization called the Executive Institute on Inclusion, and they put together custom bespoke DEI programs for different groups. And what holds it together is, number one, the fact that they use data that's custom to that organization to show that organization exactly where they need to work on. But also they partner with a company whose name is escaping me right now to leverage film, especially with the executive team, to get them to crack open very difficult conversations that they're not having about DEI. So instead of hitting them with all these statistics and you shoulds and you must and you need to have, they show film and then engage in a discussion.
Mhm.
And that's, you know, again, the power of film, to be able to just, it brings someone's story to life for you. You get to see them in the situation that they're in. So perhaps you can think about, what might I be feeling in that situation? Or even like you're saying, I didn't even know that that was what that situation was like. Right. So now I have a
Yeah.
new appreciation for your experience and
Yeah,
what
and
you go through.
it rehumanizes the workplace, right?
Right.
It
Right.
reminds people, ah, yeah, no, I am a person, and this is actually my job, and I
Yeah.
am
Yeah.
actually designed to actually
Right.
emotionally connect with people. And I think the amazing thing about film, and the amazing thing about this, because you're basically describing exactly what I do, right? Put a
Right.
film in
Right.
and then
And then
start
watch what happens.
conversations
Start,
around
start the
it.
magic. Yeah,
Yeah, and you
exactly.
never know. And what you need to make sure is you have a good facilitator and someone to craft that conversation.
Right. Because
But what
it can be
yeah, because
challenging. Yeah.
things can come up. I
Yeah.
remember doing a workshop at a conference in Hamburg. It was a creativity conference,
Mm-hmm.
but I was there to talk about empathy. And it was just after Russia invaded Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about empathy, and then all of a sudden this young lady just kind of shared that she's Ukrainian, and that it was I think it was a month after, and just
Mm-hmm.
the room went silent. And I think, if had I not had my training experience in being a teacher, because
Mm-hmm.
teaching is facilitating, thinking on your feet. I used to have
Mm-hmm.
kids throwing stuff, swearing, this, right, that,
Mm-hmm.
controlling, and you have to think on your feet. And I'm so glad I've had that training. At my heart, I feel like my real, job is a facilitator still,
Mm-hmm.
even today, as
Mm-hmm.
a teacher.
Yeah.
And being able to manage that situation, I didn't really know what to do, but I could sense that she didn't want questions. She just wanted to kind of put that. But what she put across was that she had seen all Russians as evil from that day, hadn't wanted to engage with anyone to do with Russia. And then all of a sudden she'd kind of watched this film, and it wasn't to do with war either. And I think this is the point that I'm trying to make, is that you can watch a film about something completely different, but you can get trained in that kind of perspective taking, and
Mm-hmm.
also the emotional empathy side of it, and building that. And then you can it's like a blueprint. You can copy that onto a completely different
Yeah.
social issue,
Yeah.
even if you haven't talked about it, and use those skills, because empathy is a skill. You can train it, and like we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about it as a muscle,
Mm-hmm.
you can just build it. And then all of a sudden you catch yourself in another scenario or another situation, you say, hang on, I'm judging, or
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really asked any questions. I'm not curious. I
Right.
don't really know what's going on. And this young lady was basically said, yeah, I've now thought, actually, hang on, maybe not all Russians are bad.
Right.
And that was you could just see in the audience, like, wow. And that was it. And then she just wanted to say that. She just kind of wanted to say that. I
Right.
think that's important as well. Not everyone wants to open up, and I
Right.
think that's the
Right.
fear in the corporate space, when you go
Right.
in, you're like, right, we're all going to talk about,
Our
ourselves and
feelings.
stuff, and
Yeah,
you can just
exactly.
see people go, ugh,
Yeah.
melting. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Well, Empathy Week starts February 27th,
Yes.
2023, just a couple weeks from now. And how can schools and teachers engage? Where's the best way for them to get involved?
Yeah, great. So the best place is empathy-week.com. Then across the page, there's register. Quite easy to do that. Anyone can also watch a film from last year. So there's a bit called Free. Even if you're a teacher, not a teacher, anyone can, if they sign up to our newsletter, then gets access to an amazing young woman's story called Lippa from last year, who talks about the right to wear a hijab, her choice to wear the hijab, and life as a semi-professional footballer, and the moment that she switched from kind of being a young girl that didn't wear one to a girl that then decided to wear one, and the racism that she suffered. But she's got such an important story, and I think particularly with everything that's going on with Iran at the moment that we're seeing there, her story is even ever more important. And I think that's, again, yeah, a great thing to watch, so people can get involved that way as well. And yeah, at our website, and then we're on social media at Empathy Week on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter at The Empathy Week, and I am Ed Kirwan on all of them.
Yes. And we will have all your links in the show notes, as well as a
Amazing.
link to the Empathy Week event, which I hope teachers, educators, parents who want to bring this to their school will take this and show it to their school and to their teachers and their principals and really get involved. I think the more we can grow this movement, the better. I mean, and like you said, not just developing that skill of empathy in kids aged 5 through 18, but also continuing to work on it as adults. And
Absolutely.
I remember when I was researching my book, I interviewed a woman who runs a school where the empathy is baked into the curriculum, Yalda Mudaber of Golistan in Northern California. And I remember asking her if adults, she was one of my earliest interviews with the book. And I asked her, can adults who are not currently very empathetic learn how to be empathetic? And she said, yes, but it's more of an active choice. They have to actually decide that that's what they want their identity to be, and they can exercise it every day and build that muscle. And I just thought that was just a beautiful way to remember that it is actually innate in us as human beings, but the muscle, for whatever reason, environment, upbringing, circumstance, that muscle may have atrophied. So there's always a way to strengthen it if we really, really want to. So Ed, thank you so much for your work and for what you're doing in the world. And I want us to stay in touch because I want us to do more together.
Of course.
But thank you and good luck with Empathy Week this year. And maybe we'll have you back to find out how it went.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk. And yeah, I'd love to speak to other people that are interested. So do reach out.
Awesome. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Empathy Edge podcast. Please remember, if you liked what you heard, to share it with a friend or colleague. Don't forget to rate and review, of course. And until next time, remember that cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Take care and be kind.